Today a man walked in at my workplace and gave me a hug thanking me. Apparently 2 years ago I told him to quit his factory job and go back to school. Today he was a law student and owned a house. Needless to say he made my year. Any similar surprises, Redditors? I posted this on a past account. I was a manager at Staples and I needed a cashier. I had a call from this woman about a cashier job, so I told her to come in. Her resume was crap, but I needed a cashier. In walked this short, fat woman who looked, quite frankly, disgusting. She filled out the application and asked for another sheet of paper to fill out the felony and misdemeanor section. Oh boy. Her clothes were ratty and too small. Her shoes looked about 3 sizes too big. She looked like she climbed out a dumpster. I was about ready to just tell her to leave when she explained her story. She said that she was on and coke for a few years and is in a halfway house, getting her life back in order. She seemed really sharp and her situation explained her appearance. So I took her on a tour of the store. Beforehand I placed 2 pens, a guitar pick, and a few other things on the floor and I told her to act like she was an employee walking down the aisle. She walked down the aisle, picked up the trash, straightened some boxes, and did everything that an employee should. A customer came up to her and asked her if she an employee. She replied, "No, but the gentleman in the grey shirt is, and he can help you with anything you need today." Not bad. I direct the customer to the paper and I see the applicant moved a shopping cart back to where they are supposed to be. Not bad at all. I decide to hire her. Best decision I made as a manager. Not only did she turn out to be my best employee, but I actually nominated her to take my spot as manager when I left. She got it. I've been gone a year and she is doing great. She runs our old halfway house and is the sales manager at my old store. What a great turnaround in her life. One day, this middle-aged, Hispanic woman came up to me while I was buying a subway ticket. She said that she didn't have any spare money on her and if I'd please lend her some money for a ticket. Why not? A ticket's just $1.50, and I'd want someone to help me out if I was in her situation. I gave her the money, and in a few days I forgot what happened, how the woman looked like, what the date was, etc. It was completely a non-event for me. Fast forward a few months later, I'm at the subway station, buying a ticket for myself. Suddenly I hear someone say, "Excuse me." I turn around and there's this woman standing in front of me. I wondered why she grabbed my attention when she starts thanking me and reminding me that I had paid for her that one day. I blankly stare before finally remembering. She handed me a subway pass with a smile on her face, and I, caught off guard, smiled in return, awkwardly thanked her, and went down the escalator. Granted, it was the wrong kind of bus pass. Technically couldn't use it in that region, but it didn't matter. I was surprised at how touched I was by the scrap of paper that was actually useless to me. I got on the subway with wet eyes that day. TLDR. Bought a woman a subway ticket. I forget about it. Months later she finds me and gives me a ticket. Faith in humanity plus. Man, makes me think of today you, tomorrow me all over again. Bring on the onions. I was stocking shelves in the pharmacy where I work, and a woman approached me crying and hugged me. About a month prior, we had shared a short conversation on my lunch break about how she had lived in Peru, had a child at 16, and moved to America after being disowned by her family. Upon her arrival to the States, she married a seemingly average man willing to be in a relationship with her to procure a green card, who turned out to be really messed up, trading off between beating her and her young son. It all seems like a very cliched story, but I told her to call the police. She admitted that she was afraid to lose her citizenship, and even more afraid to have to face her husband. I decided to call the police, stressing the volatile temperament of the husband and the dangerous position the young mother was in. I guess the police ended up nailing the bastard and helping the woman secure a more stable position for her and her son. She came back to thank me for being there for her, even though we were almost complete strangers. Even though she had no proof that I had made the call, it was surprising. I stock shelves too, and that's where it happened. Great job, man. I manage an animal shelter, and a few weeks ago a young girl came in to thank me for adopting out a cat to her elderly mother. Supposedly, the cat was the only thing that she really had when her kids had moved away, and before the cat she was suicidal. She died recently and left a donation to the shelter with a thank you note basically saying that the cat saved her life. It was very cute. I somehow read that as the cat was suicidal. During the last 2 semesters of my job as a writing tutor at my old community college, I had a student who barely graduated high school. He was probably in his late 20s or early 30s and he was coming back to school after getting divorced, losing a good job, and having a mental breakdown. At the beginning of the school year, he kept telling me that he didn't think he was cut out for college because his writing wasn't good and he felt dumb. After just a few weeks of tutoring, he went from getting D's on his papers to A's, which was a bigger improvement than I'd ever seen anyone make in such a short amount of time. For a long time, though, he was still convinced that he wasn't good at writing, even though he was consistently getting great grades, and I always reassured him that, no, his instructor wasn't messing with him. About a month before the end of the school year, I found out I got into the university that I wanted to transfer to, UC Davis, and I told him. We started talking about other schools in California and he mentioned that he thought he would like UC Berkeley. Then a month later during our last tutoring session, he asked, "So do you think I can do it?" I asked, "Do what?" and he said, "Go to UC Berkeley." I told him that I absolutely thought he could, and I remember feeling super proud of him, because when he started he was absolutely convinced that college wasn't for him and that he was probably going to drop out. I really hope he stays in school and accomplishes his goals, because I tutored a lot of students and he was one of maybe 4 or 5 who seemed to be truly appreciative and motivated. You should feel really good about what you did. Well, today I saw a toddler drop his sippy cup. The mom was very busy with groceries, so I went and picked it up and gave it back to him. His face just lit up so bright. It made my day, and I'm sure his. I used to work for a high street jeweler's. I had one really great customer, a guy that must have been in his 90s with his daughter trying to pick out a bangle for his wife as it was their anniversary coming up. I spent about an hour with this guy and his daughter showing them all the options we had and trying to find out what sort of jewelry she already had to make sure it matched, etc. They find one that they think she'll like, so they buy it and thank me for being so patient. I think, oh, that's nice. End of transaction. A week later a little old woman comes into the shop and as I'm the only person free, I go up to her and ask if I can help at all. She clocks my name badge and says, "Oh, you're Twizzler 26. I came to speak to you." Being in retail, this is usually a bad sign as someone usually wants to complain to the manager. I ask how I can help and she says, "I just wanted to come in and thank you for helping my husband pick out such a lovely bangle for our anniversary. I absolutely love it and he said you were so nice to him." She thanked me for being so helpful etc. Squeezed my arm and then left. She had made the trip in specifically to come and find me and thank me personally. By far the best moment of my job there. TLDR. Helped a nice old man pick out a bangle for his wife. The wife comes in specifically to thank me for helping to pick such a nice gift. I knew this kid who was really into drugs. I got sick of talking to him while he was fricked up and told him off. Around a year later he told me because of what I said he got clean for me. Pretty sure he is back into the same crap. It was nice at the time, however. I have an acquaintance who is going through something similar with her, so they gotta quit for themselves, not for others. Otherwise they will just go back. It's terrible. What your friend said is touching though. Once when I was leaving my church one night, I saw a mother struggling with her 2 kids. They were being loud and her hands were completely full. She was walking off of the sidewalk and she just lost it. She fell onto the pavement and fricked up her knees pretty bad. I felt really sorry for the poor woman. So I went over and helped her pick up her things and then went with her 2 children to get her to her car. She thanked me and drove away and I went home. A few months later my parents called me into their room. I thought they were mad or something. I go into their room and they are holding a card. Apparently the woman I had helped months before actually went to our church. She had written my parents to tell them what a nice boy they had raised. I was touched. She had taken the time to see that I got credit for such a tiny kindness. TLDR. I helped a woman up after she fell down. She gave my parents a card to tell them about it. This is a sweet story and all, but I've reread it a dozen times or so and I really can't figure out what Mince is doing in there, or what it could have been a typo of. Help me out, I'm so curious. I spent a summer doing demolition work when I was going to university, and I worked with a really smart kid who had just gotten out of high school. We talked a lot about history and politics, my fields of study, and he told me he wanted to go to university as well but couldn't afford to. He had a really messed up home life and was helping support his mom and 3 younger siblings. I told him about a few scholarships and bursaries he could look into. I ran into him randomly about 6 months ago, and he told me that he had just finished his BA and had just started a cool job with a really cool local NGO. He took me out for a beer and told me that I was a big part of him getting his crap together to apply for school and get student loans and bursaries, and that our conversations about history had helped him flesh out what he wanted to major in. History as well. He had even made a point of taking classes with a few of my favorite profs that I had talked about. I'm graduating high school next week. I was recently at a 4A breakfast which basically congratulated the top 4 students at each school in the district. On my way out, I ran into a guy with whom I'd gone to kindergarten through 2nd grade. We hadn't seen each other since, and now go to different schools. We talked a bit and caught up for a while. As I turned to walk to my car, he stopped me. He said, "Omviga, I don't know if you remember this." He was right, I didn't. But back in kindergarten you used to read me books every day at playtime. I just wanted to say that's what got me interested in books, in learning. That's why I'm here. So, thanks. I almost cried on the way home. I thought it was really astounding that he remembered that after all these years when I hadn't given it a second thought, and also that he was brave enough to say something when he had the chance. An old high school teacher found me at my old job and thanked me for telling him to try and get back with his then ex-wife. They got remarried a couple months after I graduated and are now, in his words, happier than we've ever been. So he's not an English teacher, then. Not really the same as a lot these stories, and a total accident, but the post by Fedora Lars story reminded me of this. I attended a community college from 98-2000 here in NC. I wasn't sure if college was for me. I've never been a great student, and it was a good cost-saving option since my parents weren't funding my college until I proved I could get decent grades. None of that is important to the story. I of course had my group of friends I met while going there and we had a great time between classes playing Quake 2 in the labs, D&D, whatever, and one of the guys I met, whom I will call C, was one of those truly great-natured, helpful, kind, friendly, not a mean bone in his body kind of people. Seemed like a pretty stable guy, totally normal, totally positive. One morning I pull up and a classmate tells me that C shot himself the night before. He was dead. Rewind a few weeks. C was an aspiring photographer, the first person I ever knew who really loved his camera. We were in the comp lab, playing Quake. When I asked if I could see it, he let me and I took a photo of him. A face shot, grinning ear to ear. Probably the most centered, framed up, clear photo I have ever taken. At his wake, closed casket, as he had shot himself in the head. On top of the casket was the photo I had taken, framed. There he was, grinning ear to ear. I never knew he wasn't happy. If you went by this photo and knew him, the guy looked so well adjusted. His parents, whom I had never met, were receiving visitors as per usual at viewings and I must have mentioned the photo, how nice it was. They agreed and said they had found it on his camera and loved it. I think I might have said that I thought I had taken the photo. I wasn't looking for credit, but I didn't know what else to say. That's it. That's the whole story. No, 5 years later I run into them. But I've always felt an admittedly morbid happiness that I was able to give them that picture. Rest in peace. See, I didn't know you long but I know the world is worse for having lost you. You probably saved my life. Because I deal with suicidal thoughts but now will never, ever follow through. Please, if you know someone who is contemplating suicide, get them help. It isn't betrayal to notify someone on their behalf. Give them the number to the suicide hotline. 1-800-273-8255. Point them to Reddit. Sit down on the couch and hug them. But do something. It isn't a joke and science forbid they ever follow through. TLDR. Took a nice picture of a friend. He shot himself. Family found the picture on his camera. Now have great thing to remember him by. Don't kill yourself. and now I'm going to go hide in my work's bathroom and cry. A year or so ago, a nice lady working at the body shop prevented me from killing myself. Sometimes I go back to that store, but I've not seen her there since. If I do ever see her again, I'll hug the crap out of her. I am on the other end here. She didn't change my life, but she helped me get an awesome gift for my new stepmom. So, day before my dad's wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, before the rehearsal, I find out I am going to be the best man, right? So I realize I need to write a best man speech and be freaking impressive the next day. On my drive home, I think of some stuff to say that's pretty good, but then the clincher is I need to get a plant. I wanted it to be a metaphor for the growth our families would go through and so on, and it was pretty central to my overall idea. I hit the local Home Depot the next morning and look like a car mechanic in a beauty shop. I have no idea what I am doing. I see a really cute girl finish helping someone else out and ask her for a hand. She listens to my request and then took me around the whole outdoor display area, getting me my stepmother to be's favorite color in a flower, a nice hanging basket, and some lovely cascading ivy for the sides. She even arranged them in the planter for me how she thought it would look best. She sees me to the register, wishes me good luck and goes off to do her job. The lady at the register asked if found everything I needed, and when I tell her how awesome her fellow employee was, the cashier told me she worked for their lawn and garden supplier. This girl helped me out just cause she was awesome. I go home, frantically get the plants in and arrange and go to the wedding. Speech went over like a Chinese fireworks show, and the planter was the grand finale. Courtney, if you read this, thanks for everything. You're awesome. She is awesome, but getting paid to help you. HD and other box stores now require plant suppliers to staff their garden centers during the busy season. They basically buy the plant material on consignment, and if it dies, doesn't sell, it gets returned refunded. So they provide the training and extra staff to keep things alive and looking good. I am a critical care nurse. It is always uplifting when a patient who is on death's door comes to visit and is in good health. I work as a waiter for a convention center. Recently we had a function in for a television retail company. The people that worked there were of the rough sorts from the poorer parts of the country. The company was celebrating 50 years, so decided to throw its first ever staff function. There were people that were 60 and over that had never experienced a dinner out before, let alone the 5-star service we provide. At first people didn't really understand what to do, what fork was for what etc, but after relaxing, they all had an enjoyable night. The host was a well-known Kiwi who was from a similar background to many at the function. Seeing the enjoyment the people got from the function was great. Never has anyone appreciated the work we have done so much before. Usually we work 12-hour shifts without a single thanks from the guests. This one nearly every single guest thanked us as they left, and some of the older ones said it was one of the best experiences of their lives. Was a good feeling knowing we had provided such an experience. I was driving home from work and I see an older lady, maybe late 50s, with a knee brace hobbling up the road. As I pass her, she sits on a fire hydrant and starts sobbing uncontrollably. I pull over and ask if she's okay. Tells me she just had knee surgery and is walking home. I offered a ride, but she tells me she can't pay me. I tell her to get in and that it wasn't the reason I offered. On the drive, she tells me she's walking because her car is broken and can't afford to fix it and is walking back and forth to the library, at least a mile each way, to use the computers to look for jobs. I drive that way every day for work, so I gave her rides every day for about a month. About the 5th ride I gave her, she hugged me like a mother seeing her son after a year-long deployment. At some point I gave her my card, so she knew where I worked. Fast forward about 4 months later, she shows up to my work, knee healed, car fixed, new job, and hands me a crock pot full of corned beef, cabbage, potatoes, and a thank you card, then hugged me again. I almost bawled. Little things can really make a difference. One season, my kid's soccer coach was a young kid from England. He frankly was not the greatest coach, but had the best ball skills of anyone I had seen in person. He was the son of a journeyman pro in England and had been in an academy for a pro team, but washed out partially due to some medical issues. As such, he was 20, with minimal education, and poor life prospects. He was pretty depressed about his situation. I told him that a D3 college in the US would love to have him play for them, and since he had no money, he could get a good scholarship. A couple years later, I googled him and found he was at a D3 school, and a star player, and hopefully a star student as well. Misread that as the best balls skills I have seen in prison. I was bartending one afternoon at the restaurant I worked at when a homeless man, who was often in the neighborhood, came in asking to use the phone. We weren't supposed to let them use the phone, but it was slow and it didn't bother me any. After he finishes his phone call, he asks me how much a plate of fries is. Just a side order. I tell him it will probably be around $3. He says okay and I punch in the order. As I place the plate of fries in front of him, he just looks at me with this terrified expression on his face and he says, "Oh, no, I didn't want the fries. I just wanted to know how much they cost. I can't pay for them." Well, what is $3 to me when this guy can't even afford something to eat? I tell him not to worry about it, that it was my mistake and that the fries are on the house today. He thanked me and reluctantly took a seat at the bar and ate the fries. When he finished, he thanked me again and left. About 2 weeks later, another waitress comes up to me and says that there is someone at the front who is asking for me. I go up to the entrance and standing there is the same homeless man. He says I owe you some money for those fries and hands me $3 in coins. I was flabbergasted. I don't even think I said anything of real value before he walked back out. I melt my heart knowing that he specifically remembered me and made a point of coming back to the restaurant to pay me back. What a stand-up guy. I ran into the father of a friend at a party my parents threw a couple months ago. I had only seen the guy sporadically since first meeting him in 2007. We got to talking about investing. I remembered that it was a mutual hobby of ours, and he recounted our second conversation ever, which consisted of me telling him how awesome Netflix was and that I found their stock attractive. NFLX was selling for about $17 at the time. He apparently had gone into his brokerage the next day and bought enough shares to sell in the high $200s last year for about $4 million. Really not much to do with me, but I enjoy the story. I moved into a new apartment at the end of last year and spring showers let me know my windows leak. So the maintenance guy for the building come over one morning to take care of things. I had just seen him in passing a few times before, but he was nice from what I saw. So he was working on my windows and I was watching Good Will Hunting. It got to some scene where Matt Damon and Robin Williams were yelling and the maintenance guy commented they swore a lot in the movie. I explained the plot and he started telling me about his life. His parents died when he was very young and he was in gangs his whole childhood. He had one man interested in adopting, but people advises him against it because of the gang history. When he was a teen he was on trial for some very serious crimes. In jail a priest visited him and talked to him about God and Jesus and whatnot. He had never been exposed to religion at all. A couple days later he asked a guard for a Bible. He prayed that night and just asked for strength and guidance in the future. He ended up having to serve 50-something months in the army instead of jail time and the man ended up adopting him. Now he is obviously working at my building, but he's also about to graduate with a psych major. He has 2 kids and a beautiful wife. He is a youth minister and he just loves helping people. He loves his job working. He says it's like he gets paid to exercise. I'm not religious at all, but this guy has it figured out. He said to me maybe religion isn't for everything. But for me it was like reading instructions for life because no one ever taught me morals. I just want to help people. Everyone needs some sort of family. TLDR. My apartment maintenance guy should have had life in prison for gang related crimes but managed to get off with military service. He was adopted. Now he has a beautiful family. He's about to graduate college. He's a youth minister. And hands down the nicest man I've ever met. Mine isn't really as good as yours, but it meant a lot to me. I work in a restaurant. There was one night when everything that could go wrong did. I was working alone, was terribly busy, and the kitchen staff was not helping out at all. I had a man waiting for his meal for probably 45 minutes. It was a to-go order. He got a huge attitude with me. I was being as nice as possible, even though I was very clearly overwhelmed. When he finally got his food and left, I noticed I had forgotten to put some of his meal in there. I panicked and had a manager call him to let him know. When he came back to pick it up, He absolutely blew up at me. I cried after he left. He still came in regularly after that incident, and I was very shy and always made sure his order was 100% perfect. Oddly enough, he was always extremely nice to me and tipped generously. So about a year or so after this incident, he approaches me and says, "Ariabi wine. I don't know if you remember this, are you kidding?" Of course I did, but I came in here once and I was very unfair to you. I lost my temper and I'm ashamed of myself. I just want to say I'm sorry. I have seen you working a lot recently, and you're always very professional and do a very good job. I'm sorry that I lost my cool with you on what was probably just a bad night. He then went on to tell me that he's used that situation as an example for his children when he talks to them about patience and courtesy. I was shocked. After that he became one of my favorite regulars and was totally cool. I used to work for a home healthcare agency. Part of the job was to deliver meds to people with chronic illness. One client was a 17-year-old with severe arthritis which prompted him to be dependent on painkillers. Month by month I noticed his orders of opiates began to increase not only in quantity but strength. He began to lose weight fast, and his skin color was pale from being indoors. It got so bad there would be times I would go over to his house and while we were talking he would doze off in mid-sentence. One day during my delivery, I pulled him aside and told him my concern. Of course this could have totally gotten me fired, BC it really wasn't any of my business, but I felt the need to say something. It was a short stern talk, and really didn't expect much from it. A year later, and I moved to NY and I get a friend request from him on Facebook. My eyes began to water as I looked through his pictures. Not only did he move out of his home, he got a job working IT, became super fit and tanned. He thanked me the talk because no one else, not even mom, gave a crap. I just had a person that I frankly don't remember from the Navy. I was enlisted from 1995 to 1999. Send me a rather nice message through Facebook. Our ship has a page there. He told me that right when I was getting ready to leave he checked on board and I was tasked with helping him check into the command. He told me he asked me several questions and that I didn't bulls him with the answers, and because of that he chose a different rate. He moved from a deck seaman, non-rated Navy personnel, and struck damage control, which was my rate at the time. Full stop. He just made first class petty officer as a damage controlman and said that because I didn't bulls him he made it. I don't remember any part of our interaction other than I checked him into the command. If you convinced him to go to law school, then expect him to be coming back and punching you in another 2 years or so. A few years ago I received a call from a mother looking for tutoring in calculus for her college freshman. Usually when I receive a call from a parent the tutoring will go horribly since the student really has no desire to be there to learn. So we meet. I tutor for 3 hours. Really I was getting a train wreck back on the tracks. Through the session I tried to give her breaks by having 5-10 minute chats every 30 minutes or so. I really don't remember all the specifics, but it seemed she was doing poorly not because of a lack of ability, but rather due to her own self-sabotaging and lack of self-esteem. I basically told her that she could be anything or do anything she wanted and that life would be full of disappointment if she allowed anyone to dictate her abilities and how far she would go in life. 1 year later, same mother calls me out of the blue to thank me for whatever I said. She ended up taking her F and making a B. It was a little more than halfway through the semester when she came for tutoring. For the Cal 2 and 3 classes she took over the following spring and summer classes she received A's and had decided to pursue a physics degree and received a best physics student scholarship. I was humbling to think of how powerful one person can be with regards to another person's feelings. If I had been like the other teachers, students, etc., I might not have given her the right message to motivate her, and that would have been all of our loss. I've actually got one as a part of a reverse story. I was the one that did the surprising. When I was in my final year of primary school, year 7, 12 years old in Australia, my teacher pulled me aside one day after school and just went off at me. She went off at me because she was fed of my lack of interest in class and the things we were learning when she knew I was smart. I was intelligent and could benefit from paying attention. Honestly, if it wasn't illegal to assault a student, I'm pretty sure she would have shaken me hard. Basically, she was saying to me that I was letting my potential go to waste by not paying attention and being off in my own little world all of the time. I'm a dreamer and a fantasizer. Like the little bee I was back then, I was in tears from this woman yelling at me, telling me to get my act together and start paying attention. A lot of you are probably thinking, what kind of sick teacher does this to a 12-year-old, and she probably should have been reported. I disagree completely. If it hadn't been for her hard words to me, I wouldn't have gotten my act together. I did struggle a bit during high school paying attention, but I managed to pass and graduate with fairly decent marks. After that I lost my crap and ended up without a job, without tertiary education, and just living off the dole for a while. After a particularly hard night of drugs, alcohol and various other antics, I woke up and thought, what the frick is wrong with me? I applied for university, began studying, and cleaned up my act. It's been 8 years since she shook me, and I went back to my primary school a few months ago to say my thank you to her. I saw her after class with a bunch of flowers and just basically told her the only reason I'm doing so well in my studies is because she believed in my potential and that I could do these things. Basically, it was her pushing that got me to where I am today, and if she hadn't, then I would probably still be on the dole without a job and on drugs. She broke down and cried and told me she was worried I hadn't remembered her words. She had told my parents about what she said to me back then and wanted to know if I had paid attention to her later in life. It was a dang good feeling to know she was proud of me, and I'm glad I went back to thank her. Guys, if any of you have been influenced by someone in some way, please remember to thank them for their help. TLDR. I thanked my primary school teacher for believing in me. She was glad I hadn't forgotten her harsh words said to me. Felt good, man. Probably will get downvote since it's Reddit, but oh well. Someone who had been doing physical therapy for my mom had come to our house crying about how his marriage was over because of his alcoholism. Apparently he and my parents had developed a friendship, and he decided to turn to them for advice. I was getting ready to head to the gym and for some reason felt this nagging feeling I should talk to this guy. I eventually said frick it, went downstairs and shared the message of Jesus Christ with the guy. 3 years later I saw the guy with his wife and kids. He came up to me, shook my hand, thanked me profusely, and told me how from that day on how his life drastically changed. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.